Chapter 1. The Howl of Iron and Fire. Snow fell in thick, wet sheets over the lifeless forests of the north, smothering the trees in silence. Beneath the pale grey sky, the land looked half dead, black branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the heavens, frozen streams like veins of broken glass. This was the forgotten edge of the empire, the place cartographers drew vague outlines of and marked with words like wilds and beware. It was here that Graile's Hollow stood, or rather, clung to existence, a ramshackle cluster of stone huts and timber buildings encircling a small chapel to Sigmar. It was a border town in name only, its garrison small, its people smaller in spirit. Isolation had weathered their backs and bent their faith. Most had forgotten why they were even here. The rest simply prayed to survive another winter. Their prayers went unanswered. From the blighted hills came a sound like steel dragged across bone, the shrieking laughter of madmen, the thunder of hooves and iron boots. The Black Moor had come. They descended not like soldiers, but like a storm, chaotic, screaming, adorned in patchwork armor of rusted iron and flayed skin, bristling with spikes, fetishes, and trophies of past slaughters. Black and crimson banners whipped in the wind, daubed with the symbols of Khorne, Slaanesh, and others too foul to name. At their head rode a figure as monstrous as the gods he served, Varkul the Reaver, his face hidden behind a horned helm etched with blood runes, his blade an unholy thing forged in the fire pits of the warpsmiths, pulsing with red light like a beating heart. The town's warning bell rang once, a mournful, broken sound, then silence again. The first to die was the night watchman. An axe split his skull like rotten fruit, spraying steaming blood across the frost-hardened ground. Then the outer huts burst into flames as fire-pots arced through the night, landing with a dull whumph. Screams followed, startled, desperate, doomed. Women clutched children, men scrambled for rusted swords, and a few poor fools tried to form ranks with the town militia. But it was like trying to dam the ocean with sticks. The Chaos Warriors fell upon them with a savagery that defied sanity. Steel clanged on steel, but only briefly. The defenders were outnumbered, outmatched, and overwhelmed. Eyes wild with fanaticism, the Black Moor tore through them, blades biting deep, maces crushing bone, flails whipping through flesh with wet cracks. One warrior wielded a serrated blade carved from a dragon's tooth, cleaving through 3 militia men in one swing. Another hurled a ball and chain wreathed in sorcerous flame, reducing a watchtower to a burning husk. Varkul did not fight like a man. He performed war. Each stroke of his sword was theatrical, a head lopped, an arm torn from socket, intestines spilling into the dirt like eels. He bellowed oaths to Khorne, challenged unseen gods, roared his own name into the smoke-choked sky. With every kill, the runes on his blade glowed brighter, drinking deep the lifeblood of the fallen. By the time the chapel was breached, the town was already lost. The priest of Sigmar, an aged man with one blind eye, stood alone at the altar, clutching a warhammer whose weight he could barely lift. He did not speak. He simply stared at Varkul as the warband dragged his parishioners through the ruined pews. Laughing, cutting, defiling, Varkul dismounted with a heavy thud and walked to the priest, his boots crunching over splinters and broken bones. "Pray harder," Varkul sneered, and drove his blade through the old man's chest. The warband howled in approval, chanting Varkul's name, beating weapons against shields. The firelight danced across the walls, illuminating frescoes of Sigmar's deeds now blackened by soot. Yet even in that carnage, something else drew Varkul's eye. Behind the altar, Half buried beneath fallen masonry and cracked flagstones lay a stone vault door, curved and seamless, inscribed with glowing runes that pulsed faintly in the gloom. They were not of dwarfen make, nor elven, nor even the primitive glyphs of man. They whispered of something older. Varkul's blood-slicked brow furrowed. "Bring me the witch," he growled. From among the warband came a thin, hooded figure, Thressil, a sorceress of uncertain allegiance, marked by both stench and madness. Her voice rasped like leaves in the wind as she approached the vault. "This is no mere tomb," she hissed, running pale fingers along the edge. "The air hates it." "Good," Varkul spat. "Then there is power here." She hesitated, her eyes briefly clearing. "Some seals are meant to keep things out, others to keep things in." Varkul raised his hand. "Then I will see what fears such chains." Thressil tried to speak again, but the Reaver had already turned. With a cry of rage, he brought his blade down upon the runes. Sparks flew, then flame, then something else cold. The kind of cold that burned, that snuffed out sound, light, hope. The runes shattered, their glow dying instantly. The vault door trembled, and then it opened, not with a scream of rusted hinges, but with a whisper, like silk torn in darkness, like a sigh after eons. The blackness that billowed out was not mere absence of light, it had texture. It moved like smoke, but clung to surfaces, crept along the floor, slithered up the legs of warriors, who immediately dropped to their knees, clawing at their own eyes. Voices echoed within it, countless voices, layered, weeping, laughing, chanting in languages older than stars. The air turned foul, like corpses steeped in alchemical brine. Thressil fell to her knees, whispering mad prayers. Others fled, only to collapse, bleeding from the ears. Varkul stood firm, though sweat now poured down his face inside his helm. From within the vault, something breathed. It was not physical, not yet, but its presence was undeniable. Reality strained around it, a shadow upon shadows, immense and coiled, still slumbering but stirring. And Varkul, who had seen daemons dance in the blood rain of the northern wastes, who had watched cities burn and drank the ashes, felt, for the first time, a sliver of fear. "What is this?" he asked, voice a dry croak. Thressil was weeping. "An old god. No, a prince. The first, the one the others fear. You've woken him. By the gods, you've woken him." Something within the vault laughed. Not a laugh of joy or malice. A laugh of inevitability. The shadow moved, and then the torchlight in the chapel died. One by one, snuffed like candles in a storm. The last thing Varkul saw was his own breath steaming in the cold, rising like smoke into the gloom. Then the darkness took him, and the world changed. Chapter 2. The Whispering Fog. Morning did not come to Graile's Hollow. The sun rose, somewhere beyond the pall of cloud and ash, but no light reached the ruins. A fog had settled over the town during the night, thick, low, and unnatural. It clung to the ground like a living thing, pooling in streets, curling through shattered doorways, and seeping from the broken chapel as though the earth itself were exhaling corruption. It was not the honest fog of marsh or riverbank. This fog carried weight. It pressed against the lungs, tasted of old stone and rot, and whispered softly to those who lingered within it. The Black Moor reveled in it at first. The warband prowled the ruined streets, boots crunching over frost and bone, laughter echoing dully through the haze. Fires still burned where huts had been put to the torch, their orange glow dulled and distorted, stretching into long, wavering shadows that did not always match the shapes that cast them. Warriors daubed themselves in blood, raised skulls on spikes, and carved the marks of the dark gods into walls already slick with gore. "This place festers nicely," growled Krasik One-Eye, hacking the head from a corpse already dead. "The gods are pleased." Several warriors roared in agreement. The fog was a blessing, they said, a sign, the land itself bending to chaos. Some claimed they could hear Khorne's laughter in the wind, or feel Slaaneish's caress in the shiver that crawled across their skin. Others knelt in the streets, daubing runes into the frost with their own blood, praying for mutation, for favor, for reward. But the fog did not answer prayers. It listened. Those who lingered longest within it began to change, not in the grand, glorious ways promised by the dark gods, but subtly, insidiously. A warrior standing watch swore his armor felt heavier with every passing hour, dragging him toward the ground. Another complained that his shadow no longer matched his movements, lagging behind him like a reluctant beast. Laughter grew strained, then forced. Jokes curdled into arguments, old rivalries, long buried beneath shared slaughter, rose again like corpses clawing out of shallow graves. Varkul the Reaver stalked through the fog, fury simmering beneath his helm. The echoes of the night before still rang in his skull, the whisper, the laughter, the cold. He had expected triumph, apotheosis even. Instead, he felt watched. The vault lay sealed behind him now. The chapel collapsed inward upon itself, as though crushed by an unseen fist. No light came from beneath the rubble, yet the fog was thickest there, pulsing faintly, as though drawn to the wound he had torn open in the world. Thresil the sorceress had not risen since the night before. She lay sprawled near the chapel ruins, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles, her face frozen in an expression of rapture and terror intertwined. Her eyes had been burned black, sockets weeping a thin, oily ichor. No wounds marked her flesh, yet her body was cold as stone. The warband's devotees of Tsiench gathered around her corpse, murmuring uneasily. "She was chosen," one insisted. "The changer of ways would not." "She screamed all night," another whispered. "Not prayers, warnings." Before dawn, 3 more had died. One was found hanging from a gallows that had not stood the night before, his own entrails braided into the rope. Another had torn off his armor and clawed his way into the frozen earth, leaving bloody furrows behind him, his fingers worn to bone. The third simply vanished, leaving behind only his shadow, burned into the stone of a wall like a brand. The fog thickened. By midday, the black moor began to fracture. Arguments turned violent. Blades were drawn over imagined slights, over whispers no one else claimed to hear. Warriors accused one another of betrayal, of weakness, of secret devotion to rival gods. Blood was spilled not in ritual combat, but in blind, panicked rage. The fog swallowed the screams quickly, leaving only muffled echoes that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Varkul roared commands, striking down those who disobeyed, asserting his dominance through brutality as he always had. Yet even his authority faltered. His champions no longer met his gaze. Some flinched when he approached. Others stared too long, eyes glassy, lips moving in silent conversation with something unseen. At the edge of the ruins, where the fog met the blackened forest, shapes moved. At first they seemed like tricks of the eye trees bending strangely, shadows stretching too far. Then the warband's scouts began to return, changed. One staggered back with his helm torn away, babbling about roads that led in circles, about hearing his mother's voice calling from beneath the roots of trees. Another returned with his mouth sewn shut by sinew, runes carved into his chest from the inside out. They spoke of a presence beneath the town, not buried, waiting. As night fell again, though it never truly grew darker than the perpetual gloom, the fog began to whisper more clearly. It threaded itself into ears, into dreams, into the spaces between heartbeats. It spoke in many voices, layered and overlapping, some seductive, some mocking, some ancient beyond comprehension. You broke the lock. You bled for me. You are small. Those who slept dreamed of vast wings blotting out the stars, of crowns made of shadow and screaming souls, of kneeling gods and a throne that stood empty, waiting. Those who did not sleep fared worse. A group of corn worshippers attempted to perform a blood rite in the town square, piling corpses into a crude altar. As they began their chants, the fog rushed inward, smothering the pile. When it receded, the corpses were gone. In their place stood a single, towering silhouette, featureless, head bowed, its form composed entirely of darkness. The warriors fled, howling. The silhouette did not pursue. It laughed. The sound rolled through the town like distant thunder, low and resonant, vibrating in bone and marrow. It was not the laugh of a daemon newly summoned, nor the shriek of warp-spawned madness. It was older, measured, patient. Beneath the ruins of the chapel, something shifted. Stone cracked without sound. Sigils long faded, flared briefly, then died forever. Chains forged in forgotten ages groaned as they slackened, links dissolving into black dust. The vault, though still buried, was no longer sealed. A shadow seeped upward through the earth. It did not emerge fully. It did not need to. Its presence alone was enough to warp the land. Walls bent inward. Iron rusted in moments. The dead did not rest easily. Corpses twitched, fingers scraping weakly at the ground as though seeking purchase. Vakul felt it then, an invisible hand closing around his throat. He fell to one knee, snarling, driving his sword into the frozen ground to steady himself. Visions assaulted him, kneeling before a towering figure crowned in darkness, his victories reduced to offerings, his name stripped away and replaced with silence. He roared defiance into the fog, invoking the dark gods, demanding their favor. The fog answered with silence. Then laughter. One by one, the most devout began to die. The berserkers of Khorne were found drained of blood, their skulls cracked open and emptied. The followers of Slaanesh withered, their flesh sagging as though centuries had passed in moments. The schemers of Tsench screamed as their spells unraveled, their minds collapsing under truths too vast to contain. No god intervened. By the third night, the Black Moor was no longer a warband. It was a scattering of terrified killers, trapped in a town that had become a wound in the world. The fog pressed closer, heavier, whispering promises and threats in equal measure. Beneath it all, the laughter continued, distant, amused, inexorable. Graile's hollow was no longer merely ruined. It was claimed, and the shadow that claimed it was beginning to remember its name. Chapter 3. The Doom That Marched. They met beneath the broken boughs of a withered tree, where the fog thinned long enough to draw breath without choking on it. None of them trusted the others. None of them cared. The world had changed. Trust was a luxury, and luxuries were long dead. The Kislevite sat cross-legged, sharpening his saber with short, deliberate strokes. His face was a ruin of old scars and frostbite, one eye pale and blind, the other dark and ever watchful. He was wrapped in a heavy bearskin cloak that stank of rot and smoke, a remnant of his last mercenary company, torn apart in the early days of the invasion. He did not speak often. When he did, it was in a thick, gravelled accent, with words that felt dragged from a grave. His name was Mikhail Vorovich, once captain of the Iron Spurs. Now, he was only a survivor. Opposite him sat a gaunt, twitching man in scorched red robes, the hem crusted with ash, the sigils of Akshi half burned away. His skin was cracked like old parchment, his fingers ink-stained and trembling. Fire still flickered behind his eyes, though it guttered like a dying candle. He watched everything with a paranoid hunger, as if even silence might betray him. The stench of sulphur clung to him like sweat. He was Andros Velmir, once a bright wizard of Altdorf's colleges, exiled for reasons neither confirmed nor denied. He spoke in riddles and often to himself, but his flame still obeyed. Mostly, the last was a tall man in rusted mail, his tabard once white and gold, now streaked with blood and the filth of the road. His face was solemn, lined with sorrow, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. A holy symbol of Sigmar hung from his neck. The silver dulled and bent. He clutched it often, fingers white-knuckled, but never prayed aloud. His faith had survived what his order had not, and its silence haunted him. He was called Father Erwald, once a priest of the Sigmarite mission stationed in Graile's Hollow. He had warned of the vault. No one had listened. Now the town was dead, and something worse walked beneath it. They did not speak of what they had seen. Not in full. Mikhail had watched the fog swallow his men one by one, their screams muffled, their bodies never found. He had walked alone for days through twisted trees that should not have existed, his own thoughts mutating into voices that weren't his. He kept moving. That was all that mattered. Andros had seen the wards fail. He had felt the tear in the weave. A fissure of raw darkness opened beneath mortal soil. He had studied demonology under forbidden texts, read names never meant for human tongues. When the fog came, he tried to flee. His fire had protected him, but it could not warm his soul. Something had followed him from the vault. It still whispered in his dreams. Father Erwald had dug the first grave, and then another, and then stopped counting. His congregation had turned to bloodied statues overnight, their faces twisted in rapture and agony. When he prayed for guidance, he heard only laughter. Now they sat beneath the blackened sky, watching the fog writhe in the distance like the belly of some great beast. "We cannot stay," Erwald said, voice hoarse. "No," said Mikhail. He ran his whetstone along his blade again, slowly. Andros chuckled dryly. "Stay, go, crawl, what difference does it make? The land is cursed, the sky is bleeding, the gods are blind. You think there's somewhere untouched?" Erwald stared at him. "Not untouched, just unknowing. If we can warn the Empire, warn them." Andros laughed, genuinely now. "With what? Charred robes and nightmares? Who will listen to three vagrants stinking of death?" "Someone will," Erwald said. Mikhail stood, slinging his saber across his back. "If we are to die, better it be marching than kneeling." That settled it. They traveled west, through the forest that had once marked the edge of Empire territory. The road was little more than mud and shattered stone now, claw marks gouged into the trees, fetishes of bone and hair hanging from branches. The fog followed them, never overtaking, but never retreating. They walked for 3 days before they saw their first sign of the Black Moor. What remained of them? It began with the noise. At night, the trees echoed with clanking chains, dragging footsteps, and wet, retching moans. The forest shifted subtly as they passed, bark warping into crude faces, roots twitching like muscles under skin. On the second night, something followed them, a shape just beyond sight, too large to be man, too graceful to be beast. They did not sleep. On the third day, they found the bodies, or what passed for them now. Twisted forms hung from tree limbs like fruit, once human shapes, bloated with mutation, their flesh slick with iridescent film. Horns jutted from skulls, extra limbs ended in writhing tongues or eyes. Some still breathed. One reached toward Mikhail with a toothless maw and mewled like a child before Andros reduced it to ash with a flick of his fingers. "That was one of them," the wizard muttered, eyes dark. "One of the warband. I saw him near the vault." "They are not men anymore," Ervald said. "No," Mikhail agreed, unsheathing his blade. "The creatures came at dusk. There were 5 at first, tattered remnants of the Black Moor, their bodies grotesquely transformed. One had no face, only a gaping hole that vomited flies. Another dragged its intestines like a bridal train, whispering in 7 tongues at once. Their armor still bore the sigils of chaos, but those sigils were cracked, overwritten by deeper, older glyphs that shimmered in the firelight. The survivors fought in silence. Mikhail moved like a ghost, saber flashing through the throat of the nearest creature. It staggered, gurgled, and collapsed in a heap of bone and bile. Andros flung fire from his hands, streams of orange flame that howled like living things, engulfing 2 more abominations. Ervald held the line with shield and hammer, calling on Sigmar not with hope, but fury. The 5th creature, taller than the rest, did not attack. It stood watching them, head cocked. When Andros turned toward it, it spoke, not aloud, but into their minds, a voice like cold stone cracking. "You run from the crown. You deny the first. You kneel to lesser gods," Mikhail spat. "We kneel to nothing." The creature's body unraveled into mist and vanished. More came that night. They did not sleep. They marched through the dark, their only light the sullen embers of Andros's magic. Eyes watched them from the trees. Voices followed in the fog, repeating their names in mocking tones. Erwald, faith burnt, Mikhail, dying frost, Andros, kindling soul. They did not speak of it. They only marched. On the 4th day, they reached the ruins of an old way station, half swallowed by moss and time. They barricaded what walls remained and kindled a fire, too exhausted to press on. As they rested, Ervald produced a map, ragged and faded. "There is a road here, leads toward Hochland. If we reach a town, a city even, we can speak to someone. A magistrate, a priest, anyone." "You think your empire will believe this?" Andros asked. "No," Ervald said, "but they will believe something is coming." Mikhail, sitting apart, suddenly tensed. Something is coming. They heard it then, a sound not of the forest, a march, not the chaotic din of war bands, nor the measured step of imperial troops, but something between. The rhythm was wrong, uneven, yet constant, like boots striking stone, but not all at once, like something learning to walk. The fog parted at the edge of the clearing, and there it was, a figure tall as a troll, cloaked in black mist. Its form was humanoid, but indistinct, wrapped in tendrils of shadow, crowned in flame that emitted no light. It moved with fluid purpose, like smoke given weight. In one hand it held a sword made of nothing, an absence in the shape of a blade. In the other, It dragged a chain that stretched back into the mist, vanishing into endlessness. They felt it more than saw it. Be'lakor's shadow, the First Daemon Prince, the doom that marched. Erval stepped forward, hammer raised. In Sigmar's name, it looked at him. He fell to his knees, blood pouring from his eyes. Andros screamed, hurling a vortex of fire. The flames vanished before reaching it, consumed by its presence. Mikael threw a dagger, cursed in Old Kislevite, and dragged Erval to his feet. They fled. Behind them, the creature did not follow. It watched. The fog whispered its promise. You cannot run from what marches behind you. The crown waits. Chapter 4. The Prince of the First Sin. In the deepest hollows beneath Graile's hollow, where light dared not linger, and even echoes withered to silence, something ancient stirred. It was not rebirth, not yet, but awakening. The vault, though collapsed and buried, throbbed with dark purpose, pulsing like the heart of a buried titan. The stone around it had blackened, the very earth warped, not from heat, but from the sheer malignancy of the thing within. Roots had rotted and withered above it. Bones unearthed themselves. The dead of centuries blinked open eyeless sockets and reached toward the trembling ceiling of their mass grave. Within the chasm of silence, Be'lakor whispered. He had no body, not truly, but his presence pressed against the world like a tide against a cracked dam. The First Daemon Prince, the Shadow King, the father of ambition, names mattered little now. He had been forgotten, deliberately so. The Chaos Gods themselves had seen to that, for they feared what he was, and more so, what he might become again. His vengeance would be exquisite. From the moment Varkul shattered the seal, a sliver of Be'lakor's essence had slipped free enough to infect, to twist, to command. He did not rage. He did not lash out blindly like some mindless brute of the warp. No, Be'lakor was patient. He watched, he listened, and now he chose. The warband, the once proud Black Maw, had become a hive of madness, its warriors scattered, hunted by visions, devoured by shadows. Yet in their suffering, in their desperation, he found tools. He reached into them, slipping between cracks in their minds, coiling around their ambitions like a serpent around prey. He showed them glimpses, thrones of obsidian, banners of shadow rippling over broken empires, the dark gods weeping in chains. He offered them the truth, that the Pantheon was not eternal, that they feared him, that they had to, and some believed. They came to the chapel ruins, one by one, not summoned, but drawn. Varkul's champions, those who had not yet perished, those whose loyalty to their god had begun to rot in the vacuum left by silence. The first was Karog the Red, once a berserker blessed by Khorne, whose axes had claimed 100 skulls. But the blood god no longer answered. His gifts had withered. His strength had begun to fade. Karog arrived snarling, blood-matted, half-mad with thirst for meaning. He knelt before the vault. I feel you, in my bones, in my hate. Speak your will. Be'lakor did not answer with words. He entered Karog. The man screamed as shadow poured into him through eyes, mouth, pores, consuming flesh and thought alike. He convulsed, vomiting blood, his skin splitting into rivulets of black ichor, his bones cracked and lengthened, fusing into new shapes. When it was over, he stood transformed, hulking, eyeless, crowned with shadow-wrought horns, his voice a rasp of rust and thunder. I see, Karog said, and bowed again. The second was Velka the Pale, a witch of Slanesh, whose beauty had become a curse. Her flesh melted and flowed in the fog, never constant, a kaleidoscope of temptation and horror. She had come not to serve, but to negotiate. Belacor allowed her to speak. "You were first," she cooed, stepping barefoot across scorched earth. "But they rule now. Why serve vengeance when you could rule pleasure?" Her smile widened when the shadows reached for her. Even as they peeled her skin away in ribbons of light, she laughed, drunk on sensation, but her voice broke as her nerves were stripped from her body and woven into a crown of writhing agony. She did not die. Belacor had no use for death. She was hollowed, then filled. Velkakneelto, others followed. Dramgul the Carrion, a Nurgle-touched war leader, bloated with decay, his body spilling plagues like water from a broken jar. Belacor unmade his blessings, burned the rot from his soul until only hatred remained. Dramhul, reborn in smoke and bile, crawled into servitude, vowing to spread not disease, but despair. Not all were accepted. Some came in defiance. Olgor Stoneflesh, once Varkul's right hand, clad in thick slabs of brass-etched armor, carved with the mark of chaos undivided, strode into the black heart of the chapel, clutching a warhammer made from the bones of giants. He spat upon the altar. "I do not kneel. I take. You want a puppet? I'll rip your name from the warp and burn it in the fire of real war." Belacor admired his defiance. Then he flayed him alive, one nerve at a time, stretching Olgor's agony into hours. The warhammer shattered on the stone floor. His screams became a hymn, where nothing remained but shivering meat. Belacor let it crawl away mindless, sightless, a warning to others. His court was forming. Not daemons, not mortals. Both. Twisted hybrids, beings of ambition and torment, of oath and sin, bound not by worship, but debt. They owed him their survival. They owed him the silence of their gods. They owed him the chance to rise again. And all the while, Belacor's essence grew. He consumed emotion, fear, hate, lust, sorrow. He drank the suffering from the bones of the dead. He wrapped his being around the shattered souls of those who stumbled too close to Graile's hollow, digesting them like a spider digesting flies. But it was not enough. To ascend, he needed a crown. Not the golden baubles of emperors or kings, but a true crown, a construct of power, forged from the unworthy and the damned, bound with souls and sealed in pain. The last had been taken from him, broken by the chaos gods when they cast him down. This one would be his, not gifted, not borrowed, earned. Every soul added to it was a scream in the wind. Every sacrifice bound it tighter. He began weaving it in the void between flesh and thought, every spike a betrayal, every jewel a broken oath. It existed only half in the world visible to those near death, a circlet of shifting nightmare, impossible to look at directly. It pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, which now echoed through the vault like war drums, and at the center of it all, suspended in a cocoon of shadow and bones, Varkul the Reaver floated. He had been taken when the chapel fell. His warband thought him dead, but Belacor had preserved him not out of mercy, but purpose. Varkul, who had broken the seal. Varkul, whose arrogance had unmade the world. Now he hung in darkness, body pierced by 1,000 strands of shadow, eyes rolled back, mouth open, in an endless silent scream. His soul was being hollowed, piece by piece, his memories flayed and examined. His victories became stones in the foundation of the crown. His failures were smelted into iron links. Yet, somewhere inside, he still resisted. Belacor admired that too. "You are strong," the Shadow King whispered. but not strong enough. You opened the door. Now you are the key." The crown shuddered. With each passing hour, it drew closer to completion. Its influence stretched outward like roots, threading through the fog, binding the land in threads of nightmare. Reality grew thin. Time bled. Mortals wept in sleep, screaming names they had never learned. Maps blackened at their center. Birds fell dead from the sky. In the chaos wastes, far to the north, daemons stirred uneasily. They felt the shifting. In the realm of chaos, the four gods turned their gaze briefly, warily. Khorne snarled, gripping his throne tighter. Sench whispered to himself in 1,000 voices. Nurgle paused in his garden. Slaanesh tilted their head and smiled. They knew that he was moving again, but it was too late. Belacor, the First Daemon Prince, had been forgotten. Now he was remembering himself, and soon all would remember. Chapter 5. Tombs beneath the ash. The air beneath Graile's hollow was different, dead, still, and ancient. It carried no scent, no weight, no warmth, as though it had been trapped for millennia and now awoke resentful of intrusion. Every footstep echoed too long, too deep, as if the stone itself were hollow and listening. The stairs descended in a tight spiral, carved with purpose and precision. The runes along the walls, long faded but not forgotten. Beneath the ashen ruins, beneath the burned and bloodied chapel above, there was something older than civilization. Something buried not by time, but by intent. Mikael went first, saber drawn, torch held high. The flickering light danced off the scarred stone, illuminating glimpses of things best left in shadow sigils, inlaid with black glass, bones fused into the wall, teeth grinning from mortar seams. Behind him, Father Airwald clutched his warhammer and mumbled silent prayers, his eyes fixed downward. Andros Velmir brought up the rear, fingers twitching, eyes dilated, flame simmering just beneath his skin. The stairwell ended after what felt like hours, days, perhaps. Time meant little down here. They emerged into a wide corridor, its ceiling a vaulted arch held aloft by stone pillars shaped like serpents, each biting the tail of the next. Along the walls were bas reliefs, worn smooth by age and neglect, vast battles, fallen stars, daemon kings, and mortals kneeling before black thrones. Dust choked every crevice, but the fog did not follow them here. It dared not. This place, Ervald whispered. It should not exist. Andros only nodded, his voice lost in awe. It was hidden on purpose. Not by men, not by dwarfs. This is pre-Empire, older than Nagash's tombs, older than the elves. Mikael said nothing. He moved like a wolf through the stone, blade held ready, eyes flicking toward every shadow. They passed through a gate of obsidian teeth and entered the first chamber. A great circular hall opened before them, the walls covered in bronze plates, carved with symbols that shimmered faintly as they approached. In the center lay a dais of black crystal, cracked down the middle, surrounded by a circle of scorched runes. Above it hung a mural of something immense and winged, chained to the stars, its crown shattered, its eyes aflame with fury. "The first," Andros whispered, transfixed. "Belacor, before the four." Ervald knelt before the dais, running his hand over the cracked stone. This was a place of binding. A prison, not a tomb. "Look at the runes," Andros said, voice shaking. "Those are Old One glyphs, combined with Eltherin and human script. Impossible. These languages were never meant to mix. And yet they did, Ervold muttered. They had to. They stood in silence as the enormity of it settled upon them. This place was not merely old, it was designed. It had been forged in unity by powers that hated each other, powers that saw a threat so vast, so monstrous, they had bound it together, forgotten their rivalries, and buried it in the bones of the world. And now it's breaking free, Mikhail said grimly. We need something, a weapon, a right, anything. They searched the room. Andros examined the bronze walls, deciphering fragments of prophecy and memory. He muttered to himself in 3 tongues as he read, He who was first shall be last, crowned in shadow. He walks between gods, 4 shall forsake, and 1 shall rise. Here, Ervold said, pointing to a portion of the mural hidden beneath flaking dust. He brushed it aside to reveal a circular symbol, broken into 7 segments, each bearing a different sigil. One was a hammer, another a flame, another an eye. The rest were foreign. A sail, a guessed 7 locks. Andros nodded slowly. 1 for each power that helped forge the prison, each representing a god, or something like one. Then we must find them, Mikhail said, before the last is broken. They moved on, down winding tunnels where time itself seemed to bend, through caverns lit by phosphorescent lichen, past altars built from fused skulls and veins of glowing crystal. They passed things that moved behind stone shapes, pressing against the walls from within, never seen fully, only felt. Whispers echoed in their minds, names, questions, accusations. In one chamber, they found the corpse of a sorcerer, his robes ancient, his flesh petrified. Around him lay fragments of parchment sealed in glass and wrapped in silk. Andros broke one open with reverence and read aloud, his voice cracking, Let none forget the first sin, the ambition of a mortal soul given daemon's form. He turned against all, drank the power of gods, and wore their hatred like a crown. Only together did we bind him, and only in unity can he be bound again. Mikhail stepped back. Then the crown must not be completed. He's forging it now, Andros said. We've felt it. Every soul devoured feeds it. Every warband corrupted adds a spike. When it is whole, Ervold finished for him. He will be more than a daemon. He will be God. They pressed deeper. In the lowest chamber, beneath a dome of petrified bone, they found what remained of the Arx Umbra, the Library of Shadow. Shelves of obsidian books, scrolls inked in blood, relics sealed in cases of lead and brass. Most were crumbling, half decayed by the sheer pressure of time and evil. But one artifact remained whole, a blade, blacker than night, forged not from metal, but from shadow itself, bound in silver wire, and marked with the same 7-sealed glyph they had seen before. Erwold reached for it. No, Andros snapped. It's alive. But Ervold's fingers closed around the hilt. He gasped, eyes wide, mouth open in silent prayer. Then, slowly, his hand closed tighter. The blade shimmered, as if in approval. It speaks, he whispered. It knows his name. It knows what he was. What is it? Mikhail asked. The 7th key, Ervold said. Made by the last sorcerer who stood against him. A weapon and a lock. Both. Suddenly, the vault shuddered. A deep pulse rolled through the ground, like a heartbeat through stone. Dust fell from the ceiling. Cracks spidered along the walls, and in the distance, far above, yet near, they heard it, laughter triumphant, mocking. The shadow crown was nearly whole. Belacor's power swelled like a storm. His lieutenants walked the surface, gathering armies of twisted chaos beasts and broken men. His influence spread like ink across water, and now, deep beneath the earth, the prison built to hold him was failing. Erval stood tall, blade in hand, his eyes blazing. "We can still stop him." "Already trying," Mikal said. Andros looked to the mural again, to the chained figure howling beneath a broken sky. "No," he whispered, "we are already dead, but he must stay buried." Together, the three turned back toward the stairs, the echo of the daemon's laughter ringing louder with every step. The tombs were open, the ash stirred, and the first sin walked again. Chapter 6. The Madness of Varkul. Pain had become Varkul's only companion. Suspended in the vault between realms, shackled by tendrils of nightmare and memory, he had been unmade and remade 1,000 times. His body no longer obeyed the laws of flesh. It hung in half-formed agony bone, visible in places where skin had receded, eyes weeping black, his heartbeat echoing out of sync with time. And yet, within the void where Belacor tormented him, something endured. He had not broken, not entirely. He dreamed often feverish, impossible dreams of war without end, of feasting on the hearts of gods, of drowning beneath a sky of blades. In some dreams, he wore a crown of flesh. In others, he was crucified upon his own standard. But always, always, the laughter followed. The same laughter he had heard when he shattered the vault seal, the laughter of the first, of the usurper prince, Belacor. He hated it, more than the pain, more than the lies, more than the silence of the gods he had once served. It was the laughter that festered. It gnawed at the core of him, whispering, "You were never a champion, only a door." It was that hate, that flickering rage, that shielded what remained of his soul. And one day, perhaps hours, perhaps centuries later, he remembered himself. With a scream that shook the walls of the vault, Varkul tore free. The shadows recoiled in surprise. The strands that had pierced his heart snapped with the sound of cracking ice. He fell to the black stone floor in a spray of blood and shadow spit, convulsing. He expected death, but death did not come. Belacor was not done with him. The chamber reeled around him. His breath came in ragged gasps, thick with dust and the stink of things unborn. His muscles trembled. He could barely stand. But he did. He would. He was Varkul the Reaver. Not some pawn, not a vessel. He would make the Daemon Prince bleed. He staggered through the fog-choked ruins of Graile's Hollow, clutching the haft of a broken axe in one hand, a shield of jagged bone in the other. The sky above was a churning mass of black clouds and ghostlight. The earth pulsed beneath his feet like a living thing. Shadows slithered across the stone, whispering, tempting. He ignored them. Around him, the remnants of the Black Maw had become something else. Monsters, flesh-warped horrors, stitched together from warband and daemon alike. Some still bore the sigils of their past lives, the red hands of Khorne, the silken brands of Slanesh, now mangled, overgrown by glyphs of shadow. Their eyes glowed with the reflection of the shadow crown. They no longer thought, they served, and he would kill them all. He began with Karog the Red. The berserker had been one of his fiercest lieutenants, a rabid slaughter machine bound by the favor of Khorne. Now, Karog was little more than a towering mass of plated sinew, his mouth split vertically to the throat, his axes fused into his arms, He turned to Varkol with recognition and contempt. "You left us to rot," he gurgled. "I bled for you," Varkol spat. "And you bowed to a lie," Karog roared, charging, the earth quaking with each step. Varkol didn't dodge. Their clash was titanic, echoing through the hollow with a sound like mountains colliding. Varkol's axe bit into Karog's side. Karog's mutated limbs slammed Varkol through a wall of scorched stone. But the Reaver fought like a man possessed, his hate burning brighter than daemon fire. He tore into Karog's corrupted flesh, ripping chunks free, bashing his shield into the abomination's fanged face again and again, until bones snapped, until the creature shrieked and fell. When it was done, Varkol stood over the corpse, panting, drenched in blood, not entirely his own. He howled, a sound of fury and defiance that shattered the fog. Others came. Velka the Pale descended from the chapel ruins, her body a writhing tapestry of mouths and silk flesh, her voice now a chorus of sultry hisses. "Don't fight it, Varkol," she cooed through too many lips. "The pain can end. The shadow welcomes you." Varkol threw a firebomb of charred bone and blood glass, one of Andros's stolen concoctions, into her face and charged through her screams. His axe hacked through her shifting limbs, through illusions and glamours, through horror and beauty alike. He buried the blade in what passed for her heart and watched her collapse into vapor. Belakor watched. From the sky, from the ground, from the air between things he watched. His presence thickened. The hollow itself screamed, reality unraveling. Trees walked, stones bled, rain fell in reverse, and still Varkol fought. He rallied what few remained uncorrupted 36 survivors who remembered their oaths, who remembered his name. He did not ask for loyalty. He took it. "Not for the gods," he growled. "Not for salvation. We fight to burn the usurper's name from the stars." They cheered, not as zealots, not as madmen, but as wolves, doomed, cornered, vengeful. That night, beneath the flickering sky, they marched on the heart of the corruption. Where the chapel had once stood was now a pit, a chasm into the bowels of the world. From it rose Belakor's legions, malformed beasts of shadow and steel, stitched from daemons, mortals, and nightmares. The shadow crown hovered above the pit, spinning slowly, each fragment a writhing soul bound in agony. The battle was not war, it was rejection. Every blade swung was a refusal to kneel. Varkol tore through horrors that once bore his colors, crushed daemons beneath his boot, roared his hate into the face of a sky that wept shadow. His warriors died around him one by one, 2 by 3, but they did not die begging. They died screaming. And in the heart of it all, Belakor descended. Not fully, not yet. His form was still more shadow than flesh, his wings vast and insubstantial, his body crowned with stars. But his presence alone was enough to halt the battle. Warriors dropped to their knees, eyes weeping blood, tongues frozen mid-curse. Only Varkol stood. The Prince of Darkness regarded him. "You are mine," Belakor said. "I am no one's," Varkol spat. "You opened the gate. You fed me your warband. Your arrogance was the final key." Varkol stepped forward. His body was ruined, broken ribs, bleeding from a dozen wounds, one arm hanging uselessly, but his eyes blazed. "I will not be your sacrifice." "No," Belakor whispered, lowering his gaze. "You will be my crown." 1,000 threads of shadow erupted from the pit. They pierced Varkol from every angle, through flesh, through soul, through name. He screamed, a sound so raw it split stone, so real it tore holes in the fog. He fought it, even as the strands lifted him into the air, even as his body began to unravel. He fought it. His blood turned to ink, his bones cracked and became iron, his soul fractured. And from those shards, Belacor forged the final spike of his shadow crown. The sky opened, the hollow imploded, and far away, across the mountains, across the empire, a ripple passed through the fabric of the world. Animals panicked, wizards dropped their quills, daemons laughed without knowing why. Vakul the Reaver was dead, but in death he had given birth. The crown was whole, the prince had risen. Chapter 7. The Battle for the Hollow. The sky had ruptured. Where once pale clouds drifted over frostbitten peaks, now a yawning chasm loomed, a swirling vortex of black flame and unlight that devoured stars and spewed forth silence. Lightning without color cracked across the heavens, and from it poured the screamless roar of Belacor's becoming. The hollow, already a ruin, was now a wound, a gaping maw in the world, festering with corruption and coiled with shadow. Time groaned here, the land bled here, and still they came. Mikhail Vorovich stood atop a crumbling barricade of half-frozen timbers and twisted metal, his saber blackened with daemon bile, his breath curling in ghostly puffs against the unearthly cold. His surviving mercenaries, just 13 now, most missing fingers, some missing eyes, stood shoulder to shoulder, too weary to pray, too angry to retreat. At the base of the hill, the remnants of Graile's hollow gathered in grim silence. Farmers with rusted pitchforks, women with shovels, children clinging to blunted kitchen knives. They did not believe they could win, but they had come anyway, because the world was ending. And if they were to die, better here at the ragged edge of nightmare than cowering in cellars. At the center of the town's remains, what had once been the chapel of Sigmar, there now boiled a pit of absolute dark. From its heart, wings of obsidian spread skyward, vast and jagged like mountain ridges. Beneath them, a shape began to rise, not from the ground, but from reality itself, tearing through the skin of the world. Belacor was taking form, not as a thought, not as a whisper, not as a sliver in the dream of chaos, but as a god. His eyes opened, first globes of violet fire, rimmed in shadow, then his horns spiraling into the sky, crackling with warp storm. His limbs followed, thick and coiled in muscle and armor of night metal, each movement birthing a tremor in the earth. His wings unfolded with the slow majesty of inevitability. They blocked the sun. They were the sky. Andros Velmir stood before the pit, arms outstretched, his voice shaking as he chanted in a dead tongue, known only to those who should never speak it. The binding spell he recited was etched into his soul now, branded into his mind by the texts recovered from the vault. His body was bleeding from every orifice, his veins glowing faintly with fire. He could feel the weight of the magic, like trying to hold a mountain with his spine. Behind him, Father Ervold stood planted, his cracked warhammer held high in one hand, and in the other, the relic of Sigmar, an ancient icon retrieved from the shattered altar, its light now flickering with defiance. He did not tremble. He stared up at the shadow that loomed above them. Belacor spoke without words. The ground trembled. The fog twisted. The hollow remembered every horror it had witnessed and wept. "You cannot stop me." The voice was everywhere, inside lungs, behind eyes, coiled around teeth. Ervald raised the relic high. "By the hammer and the fire, you will not pass beyond this place." The relic flared, a sphere of gold and white, casting shadows against Belacor's colossal form. He recoiled, not in pain, but disdain, as one swats a candle from the wind. Then came the first wave. Creatures birthed from Be'lakor's soul poured from the pit, warped reflections of men and beasts, all shadow and screaming flesh. They sprinted across the blackened fields, mouths opened too wide, bearing limbs that twisted mid-motion, breaking and reforming with each step. Mikhail roared and charged down the slope, his mercenaries behind him. Steel met claw, fire met darkness. The battle was chaos, but not the kind from the north. This was raw, wild, shapeless. It bled purpose. Men who fought too long began to change. One woman drove a scythe into a shadow beast's eye, only for her arm to harden into bone glass and shatter moments later. A boy laughed as he burned, until the laughter became Be'lakor's. Andros's voice rose, blood spilling from his mouth now, runes burning into the ground around the pit. The spell was holding, barely. He could feel the bindings twisting together, 7 strands of ancient power, reknitting the seams of the prison. But Be'lakor resisted, not through brute force, through temptation. In Andros's mind, visions surged him atop the College of Fire, robes of gold, masters kneeling, enemies ash, a new god, the god of all magic. He screamed and tore the vision away with sheer will, but his legs buckled. "Hold the line!" Mikhail shouted, through a broken jaw, his saber now embedded in the back of a shadow horror twice his size. Another creature lunged, and he caught it with a hand axe, even as its claws raked across his side. Blood poured down his ribs, hot and thick. At the pit's edge, Be'lakor stepped forward, his body now whole. He was beautiful, in the way a storm is beautiful, or a glacier crashing through a city. He bore the majesty of apocalypse. He towered over them all, a monument to ambition's curse. He saw Ervald and smiled. The priest did not flinch. He raised the relic again and advanced. Every step closer to Be'lakor felt like wading into the weight of eternity. The light from the relic sputtered under the pressure, but it shone. As he reached the center, the shadow began to crackle. Ervald shouted a hymn not for salvation, not for mercy, but for resistance. O hammer, O light, O storm that breaks the night. The relic burst like a sun. Be'lakor roared, his form tearing in places, wings flickering, the crown atop his head shuddering. Andros took the moment. With the last of his strength, he slammed his palms into the runes carved into the ground and unleashed the binding. A tidal wave of light and fire erupted from the circle, spears of truth and deathless memory plunging into Be'lakor's form, anchoring him to the earth. Chains of light and shadow coiled around him, blessed by gods long dead, forged in unity long broken. For a moment, just a moment, the Daemon Prince stilled. Then the crown flared. Andros screamed as his arms caught fire from the inside. The spell faltered. Be'lakor surged forward, one massive claw sweeping across the battlefield, smashing men and women like ants. He brought a foot down upon the mercenary line, crushing 24 in a single instant. Mikhail was thrown through the air like a rag doll, landing in a tangle of bones and screaming steel. Ervald ran forward, hammer raised. Be'lakor turned. Their eyes met. The priest drove the relic glowing again, dimmer now into the monster's chest. Be'lakor reeled, but it was not enough. With one impossible motion, the Daemon Prince reached down and crushed Ervald. Andros collapsed beside the binding circle, smoke rising from his robes. The spell fractured, incomplete. The battle broke. Survivors scattered. The hollow was falling into itself. The sky was no longer sky, it was an eye, vast and lidless, watching everything with terrible calm. Be'lakor stood in the center of it all, winged, crowned, reborn, and yet chains of light still clung to his limbs. The spell, though damaged, had not failed entirely. It was incomplete but still binding. He was not free yet. The battle was lost, but the war lingered. As the last of the refugees fled into the woods and the hollow collapsed behind them, Andros was carried by Mikhail, both broken, both bleeding. "We stopped him," the wizard coughed. "For now." Mikhail said nothing. Above, Belakor screamed not in pain, but in impatience. Chapter 8. The shadow crown shattered. The air above Graile's hollow no longer moved. The sky had become a dome of black glass, slick and vast, reflecting nothing. Not the fire still burning in the rubble below, not the warped landscape curdling outward from the pit, not the shapes that slithered between shadow and light. The world here was frozen in the moment of its own dying breath. Color was leached from the earth. Sound fell flat. Life recoiled. Yet still something remained. Among the ruins, half buried in ashen blood, Mikhail Vorovich crawled from a tangle of shattered beams and scorched stone. His left arm hung limp, broken clean through. One eye was sealed shut with dried blood. His ribs ached with every breath, and each movement sent fresh agony lancing through his body. But he was alive, barely. Around him, the hollow no longer resembled a town. Where streets had once wound between homes and hearths, now craters yawned, rimmed with warped masonry and jagged glass. Corpses dotted the landscape, some human, some not. Many bore no recognizable features at all, twisted by exposure to Belakor's presence until they resembled nothing born of man or beast. Andros Velmir lay nearby, curled in a fetal ball, muttering in tongues older than words. His hair was white now, his skin cracked and scorched. The spell had taken everything from him. Even his eyes, once alight with flame and fury, had dimmed to dull coals, barely glowing in the sockets. He was spent, but he, too, had survived. The binding ritual, even fractured, even incomplete, had done something. Belakor had not broken free, not fully. His wings still thundered above the hollow, but he could not leave the crater. The crown floated above him, tethered to the earth by chains of searing light, each forged from blood and faith and death. 7 anchors remained, 4 intact, 3 cracked, but not yet shattered. It had held, by the sacrifice of Father Ervald, by the pain of Andros, by the blood of hundreds. It had held. From the center of the pit, Belakor howled, not with pain, not with defeat, but with rage, with denial. His form flickered, limbs dissolving into smoke and reforming in bursts of lightning. He tore at the chains, each movement shaking the ground, fracturing time, making the sun dim with every shriek. But he could not ascend, not yet, not with the final lock still in place. The relic of Sigmar, half melted, still glowed faintly beneath the rubble where Ervald had fallen. Its light was dimmer now, but it was constant, and it burned him. "You fear me," Belakor's voice boomed across the ruin, no longer whisper but declaration. "Even bound, you fear me." Mikhail spat blood and forced himself to stand, using a broken pike as a crutch. He looked up at the figure in the sky wings like storms, body stitched from the hatred of gods, and felt no fear, only hate. "You are nothing," he said, barely audible, yet the daemon heard. Belakor turned. He saw the ragged figure below one eye, torn armor, bloodied blade, and smiled. "You are all that remains of defiance? A cripple? A dog?" "I'm a man," Mikhail hissed. "And you were banished once? You can be banished again?" The crown pulsed above them, its facets writhing with trapped souls. Varkul's face flashed for a moment in one of them, frozen in agony, screaming eternally. Then gone. Andros Dired. He had not spoken since the spell collapsed. But now his lips moved, slow and brittle. "There's still a chance," he croaked. "We can sever the last connection, shatter the anchor, the relic. It's not enough alone, but..." Mikhail turned. "But what?" Andros looked up. "A soul, willingly given, pure, bound to the light." "There's no priest left," Mikhail said, teeth clenched. "Ervald is dead." Andros coughed, blood flecking his chin. "No, not a priest, a believer." Mikhail stared at him. "You mean me. You hate him," Andros said. "But you believe in something. I can see it. He was right." Mikhail did believe, not in Sigmar, not in the gods, but in defiance, in resistance, in the right to fight, even when all hope was dead and buried. He limped toward the relic, broken bones grinding. "Belakor saw." "Fool," the demon bellowed. "You are no savior. You are ash. You are mine." Mikhail grasped the relic. The pain was instant. His skin seared. His blood turned to molten iron. His memories burned from the inside. Faces of fallen comrades, of brothers lost in battle, of old victories, of laughter, all burned. He screamed, but he did not let go. He drove the relic into the earth, into the cracked altar stone, and willed it to shatter. "Go back," he roared. "Back into the dark you crawled from." The relic detonated. A pulse of white fire burst from the crater, searing sky and stone alike. The chains binding Belakor flared with impossible brilliance. The crown screamed, the souls within it howling in fury and release. And then it cracked, a single, jagged fracture along its surface. Then another. Then it shattered. A rain of glass and light and soul fragments cascaded down into the pit. Belakor screamed, not in fury now, in pain. The crown had anchored him, fed him, made him real, and now it was gone. His body unraveled, wings tore into smoke, limbs broke into constellations. His voice warped into static. The air itself shuddered as he was pulled back, screaming, cursing, promising ruin into the wound he had torn in the world. And then silence. The vortex above vanished. The sky returned, pale, grey, clouded, but real. The hollow was gone. Nothing remained but ruins and black stone and ash where the town had once stood. No birds, no wind, no green, but the world was still turning. Belakor was gone, banished, not destroyed, not forever, but bound. Mikhail collapsed beside the melted relic. His skin was charcoal, his breath rattled, but he smiled, just once. Andros crawled toward him, whispering nonsense now, eyes blank. They did not speak again. They did not need to. In the weeks that followed, what few survivors remained scattered. Some fled north, some vanished into the forest, mad with grief. Some took their tales to the Empire's cities, to cold ears and colder hearts. Most were not believed. The hollow was declared cursed ground, marked on maps in red, forgotten in time, as all terrible things are. But when the wind blew across its crater, sometimes, just sometimes, it carried a laugh, low, hungry, waiting.